is Einav Avni. I'll be your host. And with me in the studio, I have Kel Caffekey. Kel, it is wonderful to have you. Welcome.
Oh, brilliant. It's awesome to be here and it's lovely to be with you again, Enav. It really is. I love spending time with you. Your energy is beautiful. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be sharing you with my listeners today, the listeners live or the listeners of the replay, so that we get on the same page. Tell us a little bit about you.
So I am Kel, and I'm someone who has had quite a lot of severe childhood trauma, like a lot of people. And I am somebody that helps people find their true energetic inner child. And that's what I love to do. Every single day, I get to work with incredible people and I get to introduce them to the most beautiful, vulnerable part of themselves, which I believe only knows unconditional love. But a lot of people had a lot of trauma in childhood, and that's where someone like me comes in. So yeah, it is because of, and as my business coach says to me, my biggest core wound is my greatest gift to the world. That's what I do. So it's beautiful. It's amazing. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very, I think, really deep actually to recognize that it's like really something that we've seen or responded to as why me and why did it happen and why did it have to go in this way, to go nearly a full circle to see that actually this is part of your gift, and how you can now help people come out of a place that you needed someone like that, at some point
Yeah,
in your life.
I come from the perspective of I offer what I wanted when I was going through my healing. So I offer flexibility. I don't say see me every week. I say buy 6 packages from me or three sessions from me. Use them whenever you want. You've just got a bit of a time period, but if you needed longer, it wouldn't be a thing. It's just Wix, my website, force you into how many, how long for want of a better word. But I offer to people what I always wanted when I was there. So I offer things like tech support if you want to keep in touch with me, because I know what it was like when I was going through my healing. And there was so many times that I wanted to reach out and speak to someone and say, look, I've had a really bad dream, or this has happened, or I've got this flashback or something. And what I needed and what I offer is a grounding space for people. So I work really well on my grounded energy. I have a lot of masculine energy inside of myself, and I come from that aspect. And I've also spent 30 years in talking therapy on and off throughout my life. I've seen about 14 different psychologists, psychotherapists, counselors, done a lot of talking therapy, if I'm honest, Enav. And I know that whilst that helped me to a point, actually it kept re-traumatizing me over and over and over. But because of my childhood and what happened for me, and I will use those words for, not to, I know that when someone sits in front of me who's got very similar presenting circumstances like I had, I know that that is as a result of the inner child. And because I felt it in my body and what happened to me, I'm able to empathetically reach you at that level. And I know how it feels when you're going through freeze, fight, flight, or fawn. I've had all of those things happen. I understand, PTSD. I've had that for 3 years, and I understand when people say to me they've been in bed for a long time, because I was in bed for about 3 months, couldn't get out of bed. I'm a 20 years alcoholic, completely dry now, 4 years. So I feel like I come from a space of I get it, because how many people sit in front of a therapist, especially a textbook therapist, or people who don't really understand it, and they're like, talk to me about mum, and I'm like, and that's going to do what? So that's the space I come from, is that I'm offering what I really wanted when I was going through my stuff a number of years ago.
Mhm. And I want to just go a little bit, take a step backwards and really talk a little bit about what is the inner child. And I mean, I know that most people have heard of this term, but why is it important? Why are we talking about it? What is the inner child? Where do people even start? Lots of questions.
Cool, that's fine. Let's keep it flowing. Hey, that's the whole point of today, right? Okay. So, for me, the inner child is the most perfect, pure version of you. Honestly, 98% of my clients, maybe 99, the inner child is 4. And the reason I say that the inner child is 4 is that's before the ego starts to form. So for me, and this is a download that I've had, the inner child is like the cherub version, so to speak. Okay. And that version of us only knows unconditional love. I also believe we have many other energetic versions of us, and that's something that I help people with. So I also work with something called the internal family therapy system. Okay. So I understand that we might have versions of us that are protectors, or the people pleaser, or the Barbie doll in us, for example. And what it is that I do is I take you back to the inner child, the cherub, the pure version. And for me, inner child work is about 3 stages. Okay. So for me, when it comes to doing inner child work, most people, Einav, only ever do stage 1, where they find their inner child and they play with it. And that's all they do. Okay. And they'll do things like they'll go to the park, they'll go to the amusements, they'll read books, they'll watch kid movies. Okay. But what happens is the inner child then gains power and control. And I will always say the older you are, the more your inner child starts to present. And I'm sure in your practice, you would understand that people, specifically 50s and 60s, you can start being very childish, dependent on how much control the inner child has over you. So for me, when it comes to working with different clients, it's really important that we understand where is that inner child and what are they doing and what are you doing. So for me, the first thing we have to do with our inner child is gain the trust. And what I see a lot of people doing is telling their inner child, you're going to be fine. It's okay. Nothing's going to happen to you anymore. That's great. But your inner child has no idea who you are. Because what happens is people do a tiny bit of inner child work and then abandon the inner child, which creates the abandonment wound. So you will go and spend some time with your inner child and then you'll go and wander off. Yeah. And then you'll go, and then something will happen in your life. And honestly, and I'm sure you see this, here we go again. We're readdressing things because we haven't got to the core wound. And for me, that's why inner child work is so important, because we've got to come from, what did I learn and experience in the beginning of my childhood? Yeah. So we're all born pure. None of us are born with a bad bone in our body. Doesn't matter what you do in the world, your conditioning, what you experience as a child, creates you. So, for example, I had a huge abandonment wound and I was unwanted. And I didn't know, but I felt all of my life I have been unwanted. And actually, when I was born, my mum pushed me away. She didn't want me. So what I've done, for example, is I've gone through the rebirthing, okay, which is a bit of a step deeper. But I now feel wanted because I've gone back and made my inner child feel wanted because I consistently show up for her. Yeah. So the biggest thing in inner child is consistency. And that is, for me, that is about visiting your inner child 3 times a day. Okay. And this is what I teach people. So visit your inner child in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night. And start to build that bond of trust. More than just playing or going to a park and going, yay, on a swing. Start to build that bond of trust. And I'm a great fan of using our phone. Okay. And when I was doing my inner child healing, and this is what I teach people, I had about 20 reminders on my phone. How's little me? How am I? How do I feel? I do a lot of, when I talk about inner child work, I do a lot of dialoguing. I teach people how to dialogue, because when you do something physical, you are using the left and the right side of your hemispheres of your brain. And that is accessing the inner child, which is quite often the left-hand side of us, which is why we can't draw, if I'm fair, okay? Unless you're born left-handed, for want of a better word. So for me, step 1 in inner child work is gaining the sense of safety and trust and consistency, because that starts to ground in the energy. And the more often you go and spend with your inner child, I'm sure you'll agree, okay, the more they're going to get used to you. So step 2 is reparenting. Okay. And for me, what I teach people is to let your inner child know, now they've got step 1, the trust. Step 2 is allowing the inner child to see you as a parent. And what I teach people is a version of speak to your inner child as, this is what your old mummy did, your old daddy did, for example. And that allows you to become what I call the IP, the inner parent. And this is where I spend the most amount of work with the people that I work with. I teach you to be the mum and dad you always wanted, but you never had. And there are many different ways of doing that, if I'm very honest. Okay. But for me, for example, I spent time, watching how different mums and dads were. So reparenting is where I really focus on you being the parent to yourself, which allows you to be the parent to also your inner child. And then step 3, somatic removal of trauma energy in the body, which is what you work with the emotion code, in terms of removing all the trauma energy in your body, getting rid of things like the wall around the heart, the masculine shield. For me, if we don't remove the energy and the trauma in the body, we are not going to elevate, and we're not going to be able to ascend and get higher and better, jump timelines and all the kind of quantum stuff you can do. So for me, there's 3 parts to the inner child work. Almost 95% of people only ever do step 1. I don't know how that sits with you, but for me, surely we have to go back to where it all started, Einav.
If you want to really get into there and change, create the change and create the transformation, absolutely. But let's talk a little bit more about these 3 steps. So you say you visit, you visit the inner child, right? You say, how am I? What am I feeling? But I know that sometimes for people, it's really challenging to know, well, what is the like, am I talking to myself? Do I ask myself how I'm feeling, or am I, how do I know that I'm actually even reaching the right layer?
That's a really good question. For me, I'm able to see everybody's inner child. That's me personally. So as I walk around in the world, I can see everybody's inner child, and it's always presented to me, which is why I offer, the one-to-one with me. Some people, by the way, just do one session. I never see them again. I would say, for me, when it's time, your inner child will present themselves, and you would naturally start connecting with them. I do find things like, yes, it can help to look at a photo, but try and let the intuition guide you which photo, if that's going to help. Inner child meditations do work to a point, but again, one of the things that I teach people, okay, so if you did a session with me, you would walk away being able to access your inner child in a second, because you can't reparent your inner child if you're sat in traffic and you've just been triggered by somebody that's just pulled in front of you, for example. So for me, the inner child it's the consistency that will bring that childhood through to you, but also keeping a very open mind. Because the thing is, if you say, that's me at 4, I'll tell you honestly, my inner child looks like none of my photos. Yeah, she is, because I found her, because this happened accidentally to me. I was in a visualization, doing a meditation. All of a sudden, I was like, that's my inner child. This was 2020. That's my inner child. And I just knew it was, So, but another one, and I worked with a lady the other day, and she's like, is that why I've been collecting seashells? Because what happens is things from our childhood start to present to us because our inner child is trying to communicate with us. So for any of you watching, if you're starting to pick up memories around about, and collect things from your childhood, I'll tell you now, honestly, your inner child is trying to communicate with you. Yeah, so I've recently done some work myself personally with my grandma. And here's a really good one. My inner child did not know my grandma had passed away, because I kept seeing versions of my grandma around, and I was like, it's a bit weird. So I told her. So yeah, for me, you'll start to feel that call, that inner. And by the way, the inner child will start to show you everything inner child wise. When it was my time, Einav, okay, it was absolutely everywhere. It was like inner child, inner child, inner child, inner child. And I knew it was time. But you'll feel it. Because I literally say to people, there's 2 ways of finding your inner child. Number 1, and as you're listening to this, what resonates, and I want you just to think and listen to this. Number 1 is your inner child on a swing, meaning you've done some work. And does it resonate with you that a swing is going back and forth? Or number 2, do you feel your inner child is frozen in a moment in time? And how I teach people that is a snow globe, if you're with me. Yeah. So for me, you've either done something and your inner child is moving on a swing, or they're frozen in a moment in time, because that's when they were first wounded. And then what we do is we heat the lovely heart space up for me, and we release the inner child. That's how it works.
And what I mean, before we continue with the steps, second and third steps, people might say, why? What is that helpful for? Why do I need to be in touch with my inner child? Why do I need to dig up the past? Why do I need to, really to go there? What would we say to that?
What would we say to that? We would say that your inner child is your imagination. And I want you to think about this. Every single thing in your life has started from a thought. Yeah. So you have all those books behind you because you had the thought of the book. So I live in Derby in the United Kingdom because I was thinking I would like to be in the Midlands, and Derby is smack bang. And I also wanted to be near the Peak District. So when it came to look into properties, for example, that's why I ended up in Derby, because it's perfectly in the Midlands. So, but also, like when we think about things like money and abundance, and this is a really good one that I work with a lot of people over. Are you still treating money the way that money was treated with you when you were a child? So, for example, a lot of people scrimp and save because they would have been brought up in that culture and kind of like scrimp and save. But when we think about law of attraction, we think about manifestation, all those kind of things, well, we're using our past programming to create our future. And how many people listening, okay, how many people have done manifestation courses, law of attraction courses? You go to these 3-day speaker summits, don't you? You go to all these Tony Robbins conferences. You do it for 2 or 3 days, but how many of you 1 to 2 weeks later end up back to diddly squat feeling like nothing's really happened? And it's because you've not reparented or reprogrammed, because same thing, okay? But you've not changed your base template. And your inner child creates, from my perspective, your reality based on what it knows, its limiting beliefs, etc. And I just want to cover something that a lovely lady called Sarah shared with me, and this is my belief as well. You don't have to go back to the traumatic memories. You don't. Okay, I don't believe. Did it help me talking about my mum? To a point, but it also kept me very, very traumatized, and it kept me very, very ill on lots of medication. So for me, I look at something that happened 3 or 4 weeks ago could have been more damaging to you, the person, than it was, for example, what would have happened to you at 4, 5, or 6. So I would always work with, so if someone came to me, I would always say, okay, at what point in your life did it hurt the most abandonment? And that could be from the relationship that you just, I don't know, ended 4, 5, 6 years ago. That could be more painful than it could be anything else. And what I work with is the stories the inner child tells us. So that's where reparenting is so important, because you teach the inner child a new story. And believe me, that literally unlocks everything. Because once little you knows something different, everything starts to change going forward.
So this is an interesting point, actually, because you're saying that the stories that the inner interpretation of the story, which of course we always say, right, it's not about the event, it's what you tell yourself about the event. And are you saying that the interpretation is really coming from this inner child, from that view that we had about life all these years ago?
Yeah. So, for example, here's a great example. How many people have narcissistic partners? And how many people, and here's a brilliant one. So my dad was a drinker, so I kept creating alcoholics in my life, because the biggest thing to understand about the inner child is it creates what it calls normal. So however you grew up is what your inner child creates until you teach it a different lesson. And whoever's listening to this, just think about that. Did I grow up with a dad that used to shout at me, or did I grow up with a mum that used to do whatever? And have a look around you in your 3D reality, and how many versions of your mum and dad play out in your life. And here's a great one. We often marry our dad, or we marry our mum, because the inner child sees that as the person that can look after them, and that's the person that they spent the most amount of time with. And honestly, I had 5 narcissistic relationships because what my parents were like when I was growing up, it was very narcissistic. But the biggest thing to understand, and I saw this in a lady, what was it, Tuesday, I did a session with her, and she went, but I had a brilliant, amazing, incredible childhood. Right? And how many of you listening to that? Okay. And then I said to her, okay, let's talk about your childhood. And she went, and we talked and we talked, and I listened to her, and she went, so that wasn't normal then? I went, no. I said, but to your inner child, That says that they had the most amazing life, because this woman with me, she had absolutely everything you could ever want. So she's very spoiled, she's very resentful of everything, and she lives with the injustice wound because her mum and dad gave her absolutely everything but not love. But to the inner child, it says, I had a car at 18, I had this, I went all around the world, I had this amazing life. And the inner child goes, wow, that's perfect. And you know, the one thing this lady suffers with, and she came to me and she said, I can't let anybody touch me. I can't let anybody cuddle me. I can't cuddle my children. I can't be emotionally close to my children. I think there is something seriously wrong with me. And it's because she's been all the way around the world in every crash, but she's never had love from her parents because they were emotionally unavailable. That, for me, that shows you that we are creating exactly what we had from a child. And that's why all these people are around us. And the good thing is how to know you're healing, because people around you start to change, and it's beautiful.
And so the, these things that you're talking about, for example, manifestation, or not being able to have intimacy, or something like that, is one thing. But what about physical healing, like someone with chronic conditions or cancer, or something along those lines? What is that about? How do we look at that? How do we understand that?
So for me, that's where I say step 3 is the somatic work. Okay, that's about removing the energy from the body. So for me personally, I do a lot of hot pod yoga, 3 to about 4 or 5 times a week. That helps remove energy from the body. But when I was doing my healing, and I did a lot of EFT tapping, and I had so many times, and when I literally broke down in tears. Literally, when I tapped here on my collarbone, which is connected to the liver, okay, that is our living organism. I literally felt so many tears, so much pain. I've done a lot of EMDR as well, and I've also NLP, and I've also qualified and trained in all of those areas so that I can help you guys, for example. But for me, trauma physically lives in our body. Okay, so especially if you have things like multiple personality disorder, and I'm not saying this is 100% true, I'm coming from my experience sharing this with you, but I had 7 personalities. And for me, that came from the disassociation that happened in the trauma as a child, which meant there was trapped energy in my body. And I started healing because I was also told that I had fibromyalgia in 2016. And I was in absolute agony and riddled with pain all throughout my body. And I've got to be honest with you now, I don't have any pain in my body. And I know if I've got stored trauma. So, for example, someone in yoga on Tuesday gave me a massage and literally massaged my vocal cords. And I had a release of energy because I started crying in yoga. And all it was is the energy was leaving my body. So when people say to me things like cancer and whatever, I always come back to metaphysical anatomy. Yeah. And I know that's what you personally work with. Okay. There's different parts of our body where the trauma is stored. And what I also do is I know the inner child knows exactly where all that trauma is in that body. And how I work with the inner child, and this is beautiful. This is several, sessions on whatever, but I will say to the inner child, can you find all those purple dots, or let's say red for anger? Okay, most common color. All right. So I will say to the inner child in a session through tapping, and I do my own tapping, by the way. Okay. So I've got my own way of doing it, because I believe if we tap on the body and we talk to the body and we ask it what it needs and we give it, or we say, why are you hurting, shoulder? In a certain way, okay, your shoulder will instantly tell you, from my perspective, what it is. But again, it does depend how much in touch with your intuition. But for me, I honestly, truly used to be absolutely in agony and in so much pain. And because I've somatically released the energy from the body, I've had things like trauma massage. Like I said, I've done EFT, EMR, EMDR, lots of yoga. I've done swimming. I've done spin. But I listened to my body, and my body needed to get that trauma out. So when I get people, like I did a guy before Christmas, and he was like, I'm in so much agony. We started working with his inner child, and he then, I think it was about a week later, and he was like, my headache's gone. Like, I've had a bad head for years. And what we did was we did some, tapping, and we were like, okay, why? And the headache was because he wasn't moving forward, because he was stuck. But his inner child was stuck. And that's why he had all this pressure and whatever. And I did a lady in America about 5 weeks ago. And she had her first night's sleep ever in about 6 or 7 years, because we released and did some trauma tapping on her body. And that allowed her to actually sleep much more easier in terms of like pain and stuff and things in the body.
And how bought into the idea of all of this work and the 3 steps that you mentioned earlier do people need to be for this to work, or does it work with everyone, or what are you noticing with different conversations?
I would always say you will find the right person for you at the right time. Okay, so for example, I probably would not have encountered someone like me 8 years ago, because if someone had said to me it was all energy healing, what I needed 8 years ago was art therapy. And I don't teach art therapy, but I work with an art therapist. I had inner child regression, which was amazing. And that's what I needed. So for me, you will find the right person at the right time. And I just believe if I'm popping up, I'm potentially, possibly somebody that could help you on your journey, because I come from a very spiritual background, and like yourself, I've read hundreds of books. Okay. But I'm also living proof. And honestly, I don't recommend anything unless I've done it, tried it. I won't recommend to work with anybody unless I've had a session or I know that person. And I also would do the same with a book in terms of healing. So I think the biggest thing for most people is, what do I need right in this moment? What do I need to do? Do I need to connect with my inner child, or am I just seeing this and shall I just add it as a favorite? Because I tell you what, if you look at my YouTube playlist, there's lots of stuff that is favorited, but it's not for right now. And what I've done is I just keep listening to myself, and what do I need in this moment? What can I give myself? Like yesterday, I was at the day off work because I was tired from doing a quantum healing session with 2 ladies over in Australia last Thursday. And I got off it and I was like, yeah, I need a break. So I took yesterday off work, and that's the biggest thing is you'll find the people when I believe that you need to. And if I'm on your screen, highly, or even you, darling, I mean, you do incredible work, so for want of a better word, I mean, I've done the emotion code and it's been absolutely phenomenal, and it really made a huge difference to my life. And that was it June last year, I think.
Absolutely. But Gracie, I totally believe in everything that you say and do, and it resonates with me perfectly. And of course, some of my clients as well, I talk about the inner child. Of course, I can't get to the same levels like you, but I, it does come up. But but some of the questions I'm asking you today are really coming from people that I speak with, and kind of their resistance, or their, wondering how to recognize, the inner child versus my own voice, and how do I know if I connected? And there's always these kind of questions, right? How do I know if I do it right, and so on.
How do I know if I've done it right? That's a really, really good question. I would say, honestly, for me, energetically, I feel it. And I can only come from my own practice, okay? And I can tell you that everybody that works with me, they do leave with their inner child. But again, that's because I can see that inner child within that person. I'll say the version of me that I was working with 8 years ago in 2016, that was little Kelly. And that wasn't LK. So LK is my true inner child. She's beautiful, and you can see her in me. Okay. But little Kelly was the version of me that was very narcissistic 8 years ago. But that's the version of me. Here's one. I'm just hearing this from my team. That's the version of me that I needed to work with right now in that moment. Yeah. So I had to work with the version of me that was deliberately trying to hurt people. And because that's quite often what we do as well. A lot of us hurt people because we're hurt too. Wounded people hurt wounded people, so it could just be a case of looking in that photo. What do I need to give that child right now in this moment? What did that kid need in that photo? And listen to whatever it is that comes through. I do recommend a lot of journaling. That's a really, really good thing. But do you know what people say to me? It always comes back to where it started. That's why I say, for me, I did pretty much every single thing possible, nearly. And then I found the inner child and I went, and it's that I've never done in the 30 years of everything else that I've sat in front of.
Mm.
So I would just say to anybody who's listening or watching, start with, if it's in a photo, start with that, and then trust yourself that you'll be guided over what it is to do next. And also understand, not every person that does inner child is going to be right for you. And if I'm not, that's cool. But I just believe if I show up on screens, I'm in the right place. That's how we connected, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But what would you say about working with actual kids? Like, if there's, I mean, especially I guess after the pandemic, this really kind of things and stories came out of the woodwork, right? That all of the kids with anxieties and fears and really challenging stories. How would you help the actual kids work with the inner child? What?
Oh, so that's beautiful. I'm helping a few children at the moment. I'm also going through. I'm also looking at getting qualified myself so I can do it properly and personally. But for me, a really great one has been art therapy, and that's what I did for myself. And I sat with somebody, and I'm actually working with a lady over in New Zealand, and her son is drawing his anger on paper. And I actually worked with a lady, this was about, I think, 18 months ago now, but I did a session with her son, and he was, 9 years old. And I said to him, okay, what is it? What is bothering you? I said, can you draw what it is? And he drew all this fire and stuff. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, this is how I feel inside. Like this fire rises. And anyhow, just as a result of doing a session, he's an awesome little boy, right? And he'll go, Mummy, I feel that fire in me. I'm going to go to my corner. And here's an example of, this is what I was taught in art therapy. We had bean bags. So when I felt anger and aggression inside of me, what I did was I would throw a bean bag at, let's say, a dartboard with a photo on it. And honestly, when I was in art therapy, I did that because I was angry at my mum, and that actually allowed the energy, because it was somatically moving in my body, to get out of my body. That's what really helped. And children, and when we're being very creative, that is accessing the left and the right side of our brains. But I'll always say anger is the result of something deeper beneath, and it's about sitting and understanding and going, okay, what is it? I'm not a child psychologist, but I have been working with several kids lately, and it's definitely, I'd love to get into that if you're with me and help people deeply, and teenagers as well. So I can only come from my background, but art therapy has been amazing, and drawing, getting that stuff out, painting, plasticine. I did that with one person, Play-Doh, whatever you want to call it, wherever you're in the world. Okay. But one of the little kids literally scrunched up, and he was just like literally pulling it apart because it made him feel better. It's different things for different people. But yeah.
But I like it because, even when you're working with the kids, you're actually teaching them how to express. And of course, in my world, that's all about how can you stop suppressing. And so when you meet with the kids at this age, you're actually giving them tools for life that will be very, very beneficial.
And often it's listening. And I've got a really beautiful, grounded, calm energy, and I can sit with a child. And I do this in one of the gyms. I go to David Lloyd here in Derby, and the kids just come to me, and I'll just literally sit with them, because maybe their parents don't have time, and I'll just literally sit, and they'll just happily just be in the energy. Sometimes is what a child needs, especially for some of us that are light workers and stuff. Sometimes that's what they need, is just to be. Because their little world is a million miles an hour, right? And what's really important sometimes is that we just are that grounding space, and we just, because one of the things that I do know is, and I'll be honest here, happy mom, happy kids, calm mom, calm kids. I don't have kids, but I do have 2 border collies, and I'll tell you now, when or I'm not anymore, but when I used to be, honestly, they would challenge me. And I realized it was because I was being anxious that my dog was anxious, for want of a better word, so.
Yeah. No, yeah, of course.
I,
um,
it's easy to say, isn't it? It's easy to say be calm, but when you've got, my friend sent me a video yesterday, there was lipstick everywhere, and she's like, and I'm just going to be calm, Kel, because my child has put eyeshadow all over my face, and that's okay, and the bed is soaking wet because they've had a balloon fight, but I'm going to do you, Kel, and I'm going to be calm. Yeah.
So let's talk for a second. Let's go back to talking about the reparenting, which you say is where you spend most of the time in the work that you do with people. So we know that, I mean, some people are aware of the trauma in their childhood. Some people know that it was a little bit meh, but they don't really know what happened, and they obviously tried to block it. Um, so so when they think about it consciously, they might be saying, this is the experience, or this is what happened, but how do we now move them to, this is what I really needed, and this is what I am going to give them as the new parent, and really help us or them to go back to that place and shift so that they can come out of it.
Yeah, so that's where the reparenting for me is the bit so many people don't do, and that is about teaching a child a new way. So one of the things that I do is I'm like, okay, what do you do? How much rest time have you got? Because if we can get you in a good state as a person, you're going to be a much better parent. And from my own personal experience, and some of you may agree with this, okay, all right. So I realised that because I used to get starved as a child, if I was naughty, I was sent to bed without any food, okay, or there was times that things happen in my childhood, for example, that I was using spiritual practices like fasting to replicate what I had inside as a kid. Yeah, so I realised that I used to keep doing intermittent fasting because my mum would give me times without periods of food. And just where you were saying about can you not remember, I had no idea about my childhood until I saw my father again in 2016. I'd literally blocked my whole childhood out. And it wasn't, and even though I was having talking therapy, they were talking about my mum, but no one talked to me about my dad, who was actually where all my trauma came from. So I will always say, you'll remember what you need to remember, and it will come to you more and more as you do your healing. And honestly, Einav, if I knew what has happened to me as a kid in 2016, I wouldn't be here now, darling. I'm telling you, but I just believe that as we heal, we're shown more and more layers of the things that we need to do.
And so where do we start as reparenting, right? Because we say we need to, well, I guess I'm putting some words in maybe in my understanding, but to give another version of events, right? Like what did you really need, and who did you really need, or how did you need things to be for you to feel safe? But that's my version. What is your version? What do you do with people?
So I realised, like I said, so just following on from what I was saying, I said to myself, I'm starving myself like my mum did. Why am I doing that? And I was like, oh my God, I'm treating myself how my mum treated me. So my mum was very intermittent with me. So either my mum would pick me up, cuddle me, and love me, or she couldn't cope with me and I'd go to my grandma's or I'd go wherever. Okay. And for me, I was like, when I'm talking about reparenting, I had no idea what a good mum and a good dad was. Because the inner child believes that what they received is perfect. Again, we go back to I had the perfect childhood, right? Mm-hmm. And what I did was I was like, hold on a minute. No, I didn't get that. And I didn't get that. And I didn't get that. And I started reading healthy parenting books. And I was like, my mum didn't do that. My mum used to shut me up in the bedroom. And, how many of us here are not seen, not heard? Right? So, of course, when it comes to standing and public speaking on stages, you won't speak up on a public stage because you weren't seen or not heard, for want of a better word. But reparenting for me, honestly, I watched a lot of old sitcoms. things like Dallas, Sons and Daughters. I watched Who's the Boss. I basically went, okay, I'm going to look at loads of dads, okay, on things like YouTube, on different sitcoms, and I'm going to create what I think is a good dad. Because my dad used to batter the hell out of me and do whatever he did to me as a kid. And that's why I had domestic violence in my life. So because my dad battered me, I had people that hit me too. Because the inner child created that, because that's what's expected. So what I went, okay, what does a safe man look like? I had no idea what a safe man was like. I had no idea what a divine masculine was like, and I had no idea. And I was like, okay, well, what I need to do is I need to have a look at what is a good man. Because when I was with someone in a relationship, I was like, well, they're treating me exactly like my dad treated me. And that's where I realized I had to start being the dad to myself and the mum to myself. And that allowed me to change everything in my inner child experience. Because once I came from a really grounded, safe, solid position, my inner child started to relax because I healed my inner masculine. Yeah. So by looking at what is a good dad and going, okay, validation, time, space, support, listening, empathy, then bringing in the mum side of the nurture, the tenderness, self-care, self-love, present. I am now all of those things. And I've literally sat and spoke to my inner child and gone, so why don't we feel good enough? And the biggest thing with your inner child, by the way, is understand that what you think they may know probably isn't, and they have a different version of the truth. And that's what I did. I literally sat with little me and I was like, okay, what do we think about that? And then I always use what I call the posing question. And that's where I'm like, this is what I do with my clients. I'm like, so what about if what mum told you was wrong? And you will feel the inner child go. And that's what I call the insertion point. That's where you put the new story in place. But for me, it's a process, and you'll do exactly what you need when you need to do it. But I literally last year, and I went, oh my God, I'm literally abandoning myself the way that my parents abandoned me. And that's when I started looking around, and that's why I'm now writing a course on how to, reparent your inner child. And that's what I do in sessions one-to-one with people, and also do, tech support and all those kind of things.
So you say you're looking at different examples so that you have the understanding what felt right to you as a good mom and a good dad. And then you said, and that's what I became for little me.
Mm-hmm.
But what would that mean? So of course, for me, I can I can connect with the feminine side, and being nurturing and being patient and being loving and all that. I understand that. But some of the things that maybe are coming from a dad, how, I mean, what would that look like to help bring that safety and
Yeah. So the biggest one the inner child needs is consistency. Yeah. So for me, I started being consistent with my inner child. That's where I say I showed up 3 times a day. And when I work with people, by the way, it's not forever. You ain't got to be with your inner child 3 times a day for the rest of your life, okay? But what I do is I check in with LK every single day. And when something happens in my life, I'm like, okay, do I need to sit with you? And my inner child, we have a really good, sort of communication going forward, so to speak. But for me, the dad side is the structure, the stability, the consistency, and external validation is the father wound. So that's where women are constantly looking to men for validation. That's where people are on social media. They want to look good, the filters, because the dad in us should have given us the validation, the grounding, and the safety, and the security, stability. And that's what I call the inner masculine. That is the structure, the consistency. And I work with a lot of divine feminines who will feminine themselves, but the inner masculine, i.e., the inner child, doesn't feel safe. And how many people, and this is so common, I know so many women that go and date huge, tall, big, burly men because their inner child is very, very wounded, and they're seeing being with someone big, or you get dogs, okay, or you will have loads of security cameras if you've got inner masculine issues. So for me, the dad side is understanding, what is a dad in terms of structure, stability, consistency. And that's what I did. So because I continuously work with my inner child every single day for months at a time, she started to feel safe. I started to relax in my body. I then did the emotion code, working with the wall around the heart, for example. Okay. And now my inner child feels really good. And I'm also in my body. So I'm not living outside my body, which is trauma. I'm actually in my physical body because of the amount of trauma that I've released in terms of somatics, etc.
And so I guess maybe one last question before, maybe one before last question before we finish for the day. I really want to know, you kind of alluded to that a second ago, but what does it look like when you have a good, trusting, consistent, loving relationship with your inner child?
Like me. No, genuinely. Life is flowing. Life is going really good. I'll be honest with you. Since I've healed my inner child, abundance comes in every way, shape, and form. Life flows. Life is very easy. I manifest super fast, and I have really good people around me. That's a good benchmark, by the way. Who is around you? I mean, there's nothing like using the 3D reality, right, to see where we are, and I do that. So I don't have attachments to people either. So I used to be, and I'm very codependent on people. I couldn't let people go. Now I don't have attachments to people. Friends come in and out of my life. I understand we all teach each other lessons and soul contracts and all those kind of things. But in general, honestly, Einav, every single day for me is amazing. I'm so happy. And do you know what? I'm the most important person in my life. And I know, because I put me first and there is only me, I'm an incredible partner. When I meet someone in a relationship, I know that I can offer someone everything because I've healed little me. And that's what we do. And you'll feel it. Because honestly, I'm so happy all the time. I'm really, can you not feel it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely feel your energy. I, but this is the question was really because I think sometimes, because the work that you do is multi-layered, right? There's different things that you bring into the table, and it is of course a process, and it takes some time and all of that. But I think when people understand the benefit, really, because they would ask, well, why do I need to do this? Exactly this. This is exactly the reason, because you will be one, you will be flowy, you will be healed, really.
Yeah, and you live your soul purpose. I am living. So my biggest core wound, I now help people heal that core wound too.
Yeah.
It just, like, literally, I have the best life in the whole wide world. I meet incredible people every single day, and there's no struggle. And if I don't get triggered, I don't, and if something does come up, I'm like, is that them? Is that me? And I look at that in the clients I'm with. I'm like, is that a version of me in them, or have they come to me because I'm able to help them with that? But yeah, I hate to use the word Zen, but like, for me, I'm so peaceful and calm, and I'm also really happy, really excited, and you kind of glow. Like you do. You got a beautiful glow to you. Your energy is gorgeous because of the amount of work that you've done on yourself. And then also the other one, here's another one. I'm just hearing this, okay? Everybody around you is a version of you. And honestly, I did a networking session yesterday at lunchtime, and every single person was smiling, laughing, and we all talked about the inner child and how incredible and how important it is.
So
Life,
nice.
life is just amazing, honestly. So if there's one thing you got to do, heal little you, because little you is amazing. But they're just full of stories and trauma. And the thing is, they're just waiting for you to find you.
I like that, and I think it's a perfect way for us to end our conversation today. Kel, thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing your story, your wisdom, and everything that you bring to the world. Of course, all of your information will be in the show notes, and people are invited to get in touch, to ask questions, to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And really, for everyone listening, watching, all of that, leave a comment, leave a like, help us to reach the people that needs to hear it the most.
Honestly, it's been beautiful. I love spending time on your energy. It's gorgeous. And to anyone who's listened, thank you for your time. I really hope if you've taken just one or two things from today's conversation, let that stay with you, because little you, they brought you to this. I promise you. There you go. Cheers.